Good morning to most, good afternoon to others, and good evening to our viewing audience across the pond. I am your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. Real quick before we start, if you're new to the channel, please hit like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you're alerted whenever we go live, as we're constantly adding live streams and cross streams with other channels and just creating entire new shows all the time. You never know what's going to happen. That's why you have to hit that notifications bell. Before I bring in the gang, I want to first off thank all the subscribers on all the platforms and, of course, all the patrons. Without you, we couldn't do this. We are looking to have another movie night for you patrons. And I don't know exactly what movie to show, so I think I'm going to do a poll in Patreon to see what you guys have to say. There's a few movies that I have that I think would be good movies for movie night. But every time I throw an idea out to Toussaint, she puts her hands in her head and does like the, oh my God. I'm like, hey, we have to have another fun movie night. So we're going to put a poll up in Patreon. But if you want to be a part of the Champagne Room, get access to past and present Champagne Rooms, be part of the call-in segments in the Champagne Rooms, also be part of the live studio audience for the Pascal Robert hosted Mau Mau Hour. There's only one way to become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. It can all be yours. Also, before we bring in our guest, there's a project that I've been working on for the better part of a year, and it has a lot to do with the subject matter we're going to be talking about today, and that's wrestling in media. For those that have watched the show for some time, you've heard me talk about living in a current state of political kayfabe, the wrestler's code, always in character, always playing your part. We are as close as possible to being finished with this feature-length documentary. There's a few more interviews we have to put together, and of course, the hard final editing, which is going to take some time, and the graphic effects. So last night, a long talk with me, Jean Bajlan, and Toussaint, and we decided to launch an Indiegogo campaign with some really interesting perks. So before we bring in our guests, I want you guys to take a look, bam, at what we have planned. You see that? I have to excuse my slow computer. Oops. It looks like it wasn't playing. I apologize for that. But let me see if I can get it working. Hold on. Gene was supposed to help me with the show, and all of a sudden he disappeared because he himself was having technical difficulties. Can you believe that? That sucks. This is like really hard to do when you're by yourself, because I can't tell Toussaint to be entertaining. I can't tell anyone to be entertaining. It's rough. See what I have to deal with? All by myself. And just to let you guys know, Gene didn't even want to be on the show, and this is his own brother. See how mean these people are? It's fucked up. Okay, I think it's ready now. Bam. Hello, my name is Jason Miles, host of This is Revolution Podcast. I'm coming here today to ask you guys for some help. We're trying to complete this video essay project that I've been working on for the better part of a year called Kayfabe. And what we want to do with this project is a little different. We don't want to just complete it and put it up on a platform for you guys to see at your leisure. We actually want to have it a little more interactive. Upon its completion, we're going to take it all over the place screen it with you guys, and of course have post-screening Q&As. Now, there are going to be some funding perks. There's, of course, going to be digital downloads. You'll be able to get it before anybody else. There's going to be some special edition autographed movie posters. And we're going to be putting together a little mini book made from the script. There's only one way this can happen, and that is with your help. And if you do not have the means to help, and trust me, I understand, can you share it with your people and tell them how cool of a project this is? How we digest media in this modern moment, juxtaposing it to pro wrestling. It's entertaining, it's funny, it's very engaging. If you want to see a trailer for it, it's embedded in this link here at Indiegogo. Thank you for your time, and I am out. So bam, that's what we're doing. And wherever you are watching this show, there are links in the description. Definitely going to be links in the comments to the Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign. And later on in this show, I talked with the gentleman, filmmaker Alex Michel, who's been helping me put this together. He actually cut a little bit of a clip so you guys can see some of the, I don't want to say finished product because it's not quite done. Some changes we made at the end. I'm going to get into it. But the intro is done. And it's really cool. I'm really excited about it. I can't wait to have you guys see it. I always talk about it, and I never show it to you guys. I know you guys think that I'm lying, but no, I really do have it. So I'm pretty stoked about that. There's been some funding already for the campaign, so that's exciting. Thank you guys very much. This is going to be a fun thing because it's going to be as close as I can get to touring, because one thing we want to do with this is take it on the road and actually do screenings with you guys and have Q&As afterwards to see what you guys thought about the movie, and also have a conversation about the way we digest media and living in a state of political kayfabe. Are we all victims of it? So should be a good time. Again, I can't wait for you guys to see it. I can't wait for Dara to see it, just because of the whole section of the movie that is about the Montreal screw job. Yes, a whole section about the Montreal screw job. So it's going to be a good time. Good time. With that being said, let's bring in our guest. You may know him as Jean Bajlan's brother, but most people know him as Dara Diablo, the sinister, salacious butcher of Hull. Please give a very hearty TIR welcome to Dara Diablo.
It's a pretty decent intro. I can't complain with that. Yeah, I love it. Next time I'll give you the notes, though. Give my weight, finishing maneuver, classic fare, you know.
Oh, I was making up your height and weight for fun.
No, yeah, you didn't.
And I
didn't announce my hometown either. We're going to have words in the back here. This ring announcement.
Hey, thank you so much.
I'm used to working with professionals. What can I say? You know what I mean?
Hey, you're working with a fucking shitty musician. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm more professional.
And your fucking brother bailed out. What the hell happened to him?
Really?
You know, I know. I have to be a dad and a responsible husband.
They're fine. They look after each other now, I'm pretty sure. The kids. So
the kid's 4. He knows how to use the bathroom. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, they pretty much bounce at that age anyway, I'm pretty sure. So just, you know, if you hear screaming, then go check it out. But I don't know. I suppose they don't want to risk the wrath of Mrs. Bajolan, I suppose. Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. I don't
Yeah,
know what
sorry
happened
about
there.
that. Yeah, I live in Mexico. Sometimes these are Mexico problems. Sorry about that. But first off, I want to ask you, because wrestling it's kind of an interesting field to want to get into. It's one of those things
Mhm.
that you play around with as a young person, but not too many people actually want to take it to the next level where they actually want to become professionals because it is so physical, first and foremost. Um, really, really hard work. Um, how did you get started into wrestling, especially being from the UK? Tell us a little bit
Yeah, I think
about
it's
the world out there because I
so
know
like
it's different.
yeah, it's quite different, I think, to America. So in the UK, wrestling, other than American wrestling, like British wrestling, hasn't been shown on telly for 30 years or whatever. So whenever you talk about British wrestling, people tend to think back to these really old school. I don't even know if you'll have the frame of reference, but like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks, Kendo Nagasaki, which is like, mainly like larger men like fighting in pub halls. So you got to like, it's a very different to the like flashy nature of American wrestling and stuff. So uh, I kind of, when I grew up, it had already kind of died its death in England, really. It had been taken off the telly and wasn't popular anymore. So all I really knew of wrestling was like American wrestling, WWF on the telly, WCW and that. But I never like, I never got to watch it because it was on like what we have over here in England called Sky, which is like cable and that. So I was always keen to like go to my friend's house and watch it because I really liked it, but couldn't watch it at home. So and I think that was kind of sort of a driver for me to want to do it. But I just thought, it's something that they have in America. We don't really have it here in England. Until I met a lad from London who was like, "Oh yeah, I go and watch British wrestling shows all the time," and kind of introduced me to it. And we just got drunk one night and said we should find like a wrestling school or something like that. There was one not too far away, and I went and kind of enjoyed it and started training there, and kind of started training wherever I could. I moved back, and it was just something that I fell into. And I've always played sports and things like that, and I played rugby for years. Growing up, from basically the age of 10 till about 21. I played it all the time, and I was kind of just like, I want to give something else a go. And wrestling came up, and I knew I'd already always loved it, and I just enjoyed doing it. And that was kind of my route in, really.
So did the Bajlan boys grow up? So you guys grew up watching a little bit of US wrestling. So I'm assuming it
Yeah.
was
So
probably
me and
coming
me and
on.
Jean used to watch it. It used to be on telly occasionally, like, but we'd only ever get like the C shows. So we'd never get your Raw or SmackDown. We'd always get like Heat or something like that.
So you're
Or there was a
talking like
WCW.
you're talking like the 90s.
Yeah, late 90s, early 90s. Like,
Okay, so you're not even talking like Junkyard Dog, Hulk Hogan days,
oh no, oh when I
AWA.
was
Yeah.
well, that was like as a teenager, but as a kid, I remember what I think it was SummerSlam '92. I think was maybe the first wrestling that I watched,
Mhm.
and like Hulk Hogan and Macho Man. Oh, I could be getting it wrong now, but
That sounds right.
and like that's like I grew up like watching that. But as you said, like a lot of people in wrestling, you grow up as a kid liking wrestling, going, "Oh,
Mhm.
this is cool. These guys fighting," and then you get to a point where you're like, "Hold on, something ain't right here," and I think people have that kind of realization. They're like, "Oh, I can't like wrestling because people think I'm daft because they'll think I like believe it or whatever." So they go away from it for a while, and then some people just go, "Actually, I don't care. I enjoy it. It's a show. I'm going to watch it again." So there's kind of like a middle period where people, I think, are too ashamed to like wrestling, and then they come back to it in
It,
later years.
so it's interesting you say that. So I worked an event in 2014. I think WrestleMania was in the Bay Area in San Jose, California. And there's an event called WrestleMania Access where everybody gets to
Yeah.
meet all the wrestlers. I was completely in shock at how many people from the UK were there. There were
Oh yeah.
tons of people from the UK.
big package deals and stuff like that. That's why they're doing the shows there, like all the big wrestling companies doing the shows there now, because it's a huge market. Like AEW's doing Wembley, and like
Really?
and so pretty, yeah, they're doing Wembley, and we just had WWE just had Money in the Bank over here at the O2 Arena because they sell out because it's not like as played out as it is in America, where it's like, oh well, if we don't go to this one, they'll be back again in 6 months. Who cares? Whereas obviously it's a big deal kind of thing when and it's a big market, England, for them, and a small market. They could do, a tour of England in what, like three or four shows, and they don't have to get on 18 plane flights.
Yeah.
So I
It's
bet
the
they love it
size of
coming here.
California. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I did want to ask you, so you brought up an interesting point that there was a moment in wrestling, and I would say to me, this moment is in like the latter part of the 80s. Sometimes I put too much historical significance on some of this stuff, but post Cold War, you
Mm.
really get people's because a lot of the iconography of wrestling is like Hulk Hogan, I'm a real American, Iron Sheik is a terrorist,
Cheek.
Nikolai Volkov is
Ivan
this,
Volkov, yeah.
who I met. I have an autograph somewhere from him. The nicest man, and remember, I'm growing up in Cold War America, so he's the arch enemy
Terrifying.
bad guy with Rowdy Rodney Piper. When I met him, he's like everybody's grandpa. I got to meet him before he passed. But there's a moment where people kind of go, "This is fake," and it's been happening a lot through wrestling. There's we put this clip in the movie. There's a moment in the kayfabe movie. There's a moment where John Stossel is interviewing, and I can't remember the wrestler's name. This very large white dude. I think he actually ended up getting kicked out of wrestling and became a bounty hunter in real life. But Vince
Yeah.
McMahon had told him, this is like at the very beginning of WWF when it was still like WWWWF.
WWF, yeah.
Yeah, and he told him, he said, let him know. He just kind of gave him like let him know it's real, because they used to always go, is this real? And John Stossel, that works for 2020, I think, is asking the guy, is it real? And the man slaps the dog shit out of the reporter. And he said, is that real? And then he hits him with the other. He ended up busting his eardrum. He slapped his shit
Yeah.
out of him that hard.
I think there's a famous one of I think there's Andre the Giant, like some TV presenter asks him, "Oh, is it real?" And he's like, "Oh, I'll give you a body slam," and then just like slams him on the floor of this thing, and is just absolutely destroys this man. I mean, well, kayfabe was obviously a lot stronger. Like he just picks up this man like a rag doll and chucks him on the floor, and well, yeah, as I say, kayfabe was a lot stronger. Like people had a lot more faith in it, a lot more belief in it, and there was a lot more question about it. Whereas,
yeah.
so they had to be real in that, like because a lot of people did believe it was real.
Well,
So
let's get into that. I want to hear your opinion on this as someone that's actually in the business. The way I look at it, and I was doing this feature length documentary where I'm using wrestling, juxtaposed to the way we view media. There's something interesting, and that's the Montreal screw job. Because the Montreal screw job is this moment where, for those that don't know, there's a wrestler named Bret Hart who is comes from a long wrestling family. His dad was a trainer of many wrestlers. All of his family wrestled. And it was his time to be the champion. And he was supposed to surrender his title because he was leaving to go to WCW, because when it came time to renew his contract, WWE, I think they were WWE at the time, couldn't give him
I
the
think
money
it
that
was,
WCW was going to give him. And so he goes to WCW, but he's supposed to surrender his title. And this is just the way it works. When you're leaving a promotion, you bring somebody else over, which is you bring somebody else as the new champion. Apparently, Hart and Shawn Michaels had personal beef. I personally don't believe that they had personal beef. I think they're just that true to the kayfabe that they're like, we gotta, play this up. But I'm sure people do have personal beefs behind the rope here and there, right?
of course, like any kind of showbiz where there's egos around, and you think wrestlers are all ego. You think being in a band, you've got 5 people in a band. The wrestlers, everyone's their own band. It's like everyone's ego's getting it. So I do think they will have had genuine heat because if you see any of like the top wrestlers, if you see any of their podcasts or anything about them, you realize they believe their own hype. They are the best there ever was, is, and will be. And that's how I guess they get to the top of the game. But like, yeah, I think the definite egos, definite personal beef, and you can fall out, especially at that stage where there was so much money being thrown around and so many,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
drugs and the rock star lifestyle and stuff. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, they're going to fall out. You know what I mean?
Wife
So
banging, yeah, all you name it, it's going
it's
on
all
in this
going on.
moment. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
what makes
exactly.
it interesting, but this is what makes it interesting to me. So, uh, Bret Hart says that he makes an agreement with, and everyone that tells you the story, in my opinion, is such a student of kayfabe. I just can't believe them. So Jim Cornette tells the story, I don't believe him.
Yeah,
When Vince
yeah.
McMahon tells the story, I don't believe him. Bret Hart and Owen fooled their mom so bad she thought they really had beef for like 4 months. Like that's how true to kayfabe the Hart family is. So anyway, Bret Hart agrees with Vince McMahon. This is the story that comes out to the public. Bret Hart agrees with Vince McMahon that he's going to have a draw with Shawn Michaels, and he will then have a press announcement that he's leaving, and then Shawn Michaels can be the champion. He doesn't want to lose his title. Now, keep in mind, none of these titles are earned. You earn it by being a draw. That's how you earn it, right? And so they say that they're going to do a double cross and fool Bret Hart. And, because a lot of this stuff is worked out beforehand. So Shawn Michaels puts Bret Hart in his finishing move, and the ref does a 3 count really quickly. Bret Hart is surprised, and all of a sudden he starts gesturing to the camera, and the camera pulls in on him, and he gestures WCW. He spits on Vince McMahon's face with the camera pulls in tight on that. And I think it's all kayfabe, and I think it's interesting because in this moment where people are kind of falling out of favor with WWE, and WCW is already pivoting into what we're going to call the attitude era of wrestling, where we're kind of moving away from these traditional baby faces and heels, and it's more anti-heroes. Um, you have to let people in to make them think they understand the drama, and that pivot to a Jerry Springer style show with the Montreal Screwjob really changes WWE, changes wrestling, but it's still all kayfabe. What do you think? Because I know you know about this.
I mean, yeah, I can see it. I don't think they would have been able to pull it off that effectively. I mean, yeah, a lot of the things we realize is the best storylines in wrestling. Well, not all of them, but some of the best storylines in wrestling are based on true life events.
Mm.
And but whether they would have gone to the lengths at that point of letting Bret Hart go on there and spit on Vince McMahon and put up the sign for WCW, I don't know. I don't think Bret Brett seems like I don't know. I've read his book. I've obviously never met the man or anything like that, and he seems to he's very serious about his craft and things like that. And I don't think, and I see what you mean from the sense of the kayfabe side of things. If they're very like strongly indoctrinated into, kayfabe, they wouldn't reveal these things. But I think I think one of them would have taught by now. And also, what you realize is most people who are, of that generation of like strong, like adherence to kayfabe, they also none of them tell the truth either. So they'll all give a different story. So they probably is never ever going to know the exact truth,
Yeah.
and that is 100% accurate. Like they will all have a different story, and they'll all believe they're true. Like their version is true.
Oh, yeah,
But
they're crazy. They're crazy. These guys are
it's
crazy. I met Bret Hart. I met Bret Hart at Access, right? Because every wrestler that you've ever seen in the major leagues of wrestling is at Access. If they can
Yeah,
dig
yeah.
these guys out of a grave, you see dudes that can barely walk,
Well,
right?
there's the old school like wrestling crowd and stuff. It's the same in Britain. Like some of the old British wrestlers successful, but you look into their past and it's like, who are these men? They're like weird drifters and things like this, or
Yeah.
like odd like people who can just go around and live that touring life. So you get these people are like they come up with all manner of stories, and it's hard to pin them down. I think like on what the actual true story is, unless people were there. It's you'll never know. You'll never know. And
You'll never know. You're right. You never know. Like meeting Bret Hart,
hmm,
the only Bret Hart I knew was like Bret Hart with the pink
hmm.
unitard and the
Yeah,
sunglasses.
yeah.
And you see him, I didn't realize who he was because first of all, everybody looks a little smaller in real life. Some of these guys are way taller than you think.
Oh yeah.
Some
Yeah,
like
well,
like
yeah.
Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan has to have lost like 6 inches because he can't stand up straight.
Oh, he's had so many He's probably had about 6 vertebrae removed. The fellow, like he's had so many back surgeries. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
It's all
What's
that doing the leg droppers just for 30, 40 years. It just destroyed him.
and I want to ask you about this too, because as someone that is kind of in the trenches, right?
Hmm.
I did music for years in the trenches. I had a short, this much of a stint where I got to open up for a larger artist and got a little taste of dressing rooms and sold out big room, right?
Yeah,
But the
bottles of
majority,
water.
right? You're like, there's a case of water in here. What tarnation? Uh, and I know it's a similar struggle for you, right? You do it because you love it.
Hmm.
You're reaching for whatever the hell the brass ring is, because it is why you keep doing it, right?
Hmm.
Um, tell me what it's like. I know what it's like as a broke band on tour, sleeping in Walmart parking lots. You don't have Walmart, you're just sleeping in Asda parking
Yeah.
lot. um, what is it like on the grind when you're, because I think people see wrestling on TV and assume everybody is doing well and everyone's getting paid for this. And even pro wrestlers don't get paid that much. Is the reason why these guys go broke. But what is it like
Oh,
at
yeah.
your level of wrestling?
Oh, yeah. It's a very different kettle of fish, and again, it's very different in England compared to America, because obviously we get American lads coming over, and basically because England's so small, you can tour and do several shows uh, at once. Whereas like in America, obviously the distance between shows, they're like a 5 hour show
Yeah.
for the American lads is like a local show. They're like, oh, it's only 5 hours away. If we have a 5 hour drive here, we're like, oh my god, what is this about? So they're like, a lot of the touring wrestlers in America just don't get as much experience as they can do in America, which is why a lot of Americans used to love to come to England, because we'd have the summer
Mm.
camps. So basically, your summer holidays. I guess you have summer break in America on school.
Not like y'all
Like
have
a
it. Y'all have proper vacations.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So in England we get our 6 weeks off school in the
Okay, yeah, we
summer.
have something like that. We have something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So we have that, and then we have like 2 weeks at Easter, half term, spring break, and all that kind of stuff. And during that, they have holiday camps. So these caravan parks where people will go by the sea, and there'll be entertainment for the families. So wrestling's been kind of a staple for years at these holiday camps, and they're all over the country. So all over the summer, families are going to these camps to swim and do whatever and be entertained. And wrestling would be at all of them. So you could tour around all summer and do 2 or 3 shows a day for 6 weeks. So like just the amount of reps you'd get in is insane compared to what you get in America. Like, the schedule that you might get 2 or 3 shows a week if you're lucky, if you're a busy like indie wrestler in America. Like in England, you can literally tour around 6 weeks, 2 or 3 shows a day with a day off, maybe. You'd be doing hundreds of matches. And as I say, like a lot of American wrestlers, like a lot of the biggest American wrestlers now, Daniel Bryan came
Mhm.
over and did a summer at Butlins, which like people will think is wild. Like Butlins is this real family friendly camp. Um, what's he called? What's his name? CM Punk's best mate.
Mhm.
Mm, I can't remember his name now. Oh, totally. Colt Cabana. Colt Cabana, yeah.
Mhm.
Famously, a big fan of the British style of wrestling, come over and do it. And all these wrestlers want to come over. Like, there are so many. Juice Robinson, a lot of guys at the top of wrestling now have been over to do these holiday camps. And you would travel around, as I say, in the back of a van or in the back of a full car. Like, I've traveled around in the back of an 8-seater car covered in merch, so like toy wrestling toys and
Yeah.
foam fingers, like foam hands,
Yep.
at the back of an 8-seater car on a little like fold down flappy chair for like 4 hours, just covered in there to get out because I
Yeah.
was I was the young boy, so I got the back seat covered in stuff while they're all drinking cider on the front seats. And you travel for 5 hours, set the ring up, do a show, get get chewed out by whatever senior wrestlers were there, pack the ring up, maybe move on to another show or get some you head down and then up tomorrow for the to travel to the next venue to do the next show, take the ring down, put it back up, blah blah blah,
You're
fit your
setting the
fit your
ring up and
miles in.
breaking down. You're setting it up and breaking it down.
Yeah, so like it's a small
Really?
crew. These things it's done on the cheap. So there'll be a crew of like maybe 6 or 7 wrestlers and referees and stuff like that. There'll be the promoter. The old like there's a big company in England, just All Star Wrestling. It was ran by a promoter called Brian Dixon, who sadly passed away recently, but an absolutely legendary promoter. And he promoted all the way from the 70s up until, recently. And he promoted all the big wrestling stars like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks over here, who are huge like stars. In fact, I think he's credited with giving Giant Haystacks his name, who did wrestle in WCW under the name of Loch Ness briefly in the 90s, but sadly he was really old, and it was shortly before he passed away as well. But yeah, so he runs All Star, and a who's who of wrestling he has seen it all, and just that kind of experience. And I think the experience you get doing that, like that British style,
Mhm.
is just like invaluable. And anyone who's actually done it and gone on and made a success will tell you like the amount of reps you get. You can try things on a night. So you'll do one thing one night and go, that didn't work. But we've got another show like later on tonight. We'll try it again. Maybe it'll move it around. So you could end up after 6 weeks of wrestling, maybe twice a day for 6 weeks. You've really honed your craft at that point. And that's why you see, like, if you watch any of the old British World of Sport wrestling, they're absolutely like phenomenal wrestlers, like in terms of their in-ring ability, making it all look real. And it's all just the amount of practice that they put in. And that's only available if you can, if you've got the shows to do it on and the reps to put in.
Now, speaking of British wrestling, I grew up again in the 80s. I'm a little older than Bajlan boys.
Mm.
And the tag team champions when I was a kid were two Brits called the British Bulldogs.
Mm.
And until oh god, who were the Doom guys? That
Legion of
had
Doom, the
Legion until
Road
Legion of
Warriors.
Doom came along, the British Bulldogs were kind of the end all be all for me and my cousin, who was a very large wrestling fan. It was all about the British Bulldogs. Whenever they would come on, we're like, "Oh shit, there's Danny Boy." Um, is that indicative of the British style that you talk about of wrestling?
Um, Well, Dynamite Kid is kind of well, not really at all. Like you think more the British style is more like a William Regal, later or Steven Regal, as he was in WCW in the 90s, and Dave Taylor, Fit Finlay. It was more that kind of like submission style where it was more like, trading holds and things like that. I mean, wrestling has always been, like a show, even in the 70s. But back then, the way it was presented was a lot more sports like. It was shown on a sports channel, so people would just watch it and go, okay. Then they'd see like people like, the more like excitement, sports entertainment
Yeah.
aspects of it. And then they'd go, oh, this is the not real wrestling. And then they'd see like other they go, oh, this is the real wrestling where they're actually trading holds and things. So there was still, you're like, oh, some of it's not real, but it does make you question other parts of it. So I think, yeah, the British style is more like a hold based submissions. But in
Mm,
wrestling, I think the idea of these separate styles is kind of gradually being like eroded away. So
mhm.
now, because wrestling's anyone can watch any wrestling now, like there's so many streaming services or
Yeah.
watching it on YouTube and whatever else. You're not limited like you used to be, just like, oh, I've got these tapes of, I'm watching death matches from Japan, or I'm watching
Yeah.
Mexican like lucha libre. Like
Yeah.
now you can watch it all online. So people can see these and exposed to it. So instead of like, a wrestler from England going, every Saturday I go and watch, Kendo Nagasaki fight Rollerball Rocco, and I watch, that style, and that's what I learn.
Mhm,
Or some kid in Mexico going, oh, I'm going to go watch, Silver King versus Mil Mascaras, I don't know, whatever.
mhm.
And they see that style, and that's how they grow up wrestling. Now you can watch everything. So instead of being that kind of, there's the lucha libre Mexican style, or the like American style, like more punching and brawling, or the British submission style, or the Japanese style, which is more like martial arts with kicks and things like that. Everyone watches everything, so it all kind of blends together. So everyone's a bit more of a hybrid act.
The
So, like, I
MMA,
think,
the MMA, if you
yeah, and
will,
like
of
obviously the
wrestling.
MMA influence as well. Like, obviously that adds a level of legitimacy to it, which is, the people being more clued up on MMA means that people are more likely to know what works and what doesn't work. So if you put on a real phony hold, people are going to go, well, I know that's that's bollocks, that. So it takes them out of it. Whereas now, you've got to be a little bit more realistic. So they go, oh yeah, I know that, that is a legit hold or whatever. So there's a certain aspect to it that has definitely influenced like pro wrestling today, and it should. Like, it's got to evolve with the time. If we're all still stomping each other and giving each other bear hugs, then it's only just gonna. I mean,
We can,
I'm not against a bear hug, but you better be 8 foot tall and like huge to be doing it.
Big John Studd or Andre the Giant
Yeah,
Baby.
Big John, like, if you're 5'6" and a peanut and trying to put a bear hug on me, I'm just like, come on. You've got to. There's a limit to how much we can suspend disbelief. You know what I mean?
Okay, well, let me ask you. This is exactly what I'm getting into next. Now, also in the research I was doing, and this didn't make it into the film because I couldn't. I I'm trying to use wrestling a little bit, but in writing out the script, I kind of went too far down a wrestling rabbit hole of history. So,
It's easy to
um,
do.
oh man,
Again, whatever you've researched is probably all lies, rumor, and hearsay, because no one will tell you the
yes,
truth.
yes, it was more about like the history and also kind of asking the question, is this sport, right?
Mhm.
Um, and I say, me personally, I say, yeah, because sport is entertainment, and whether or not the outcomes are predetermined, it's still entertainment. I don't really care about that. I'm here to be entertained. If you want to use steroids and hit baseballs 900 feet, I want to see that. I love the Barry. I'm from the Bay Area. I love Barry Bonds. I don't give a shit. Uh, as bad as that's probably going to sound, but in the mid 90s there becomes this kind of explosion, and probably the later 90s as well, and a lot of this has to do also with the blow up of things like YouTube and the easy access to home video recording equipment, backyard wrestling, where you have unsanctioned matches in backyards and young people are trying to do what they see professionals do, and you start to get more extreme promotions coming out of the East Coast of the United States, like ECW, where you see, people jumping off the top of the light trellis
Mm.
and just
Through burning
breaking.
tables wrapped in
Oh
barbed wire.
god,
The classic
onto
fare. Yeah, yeah.
nails. It forced mainstream wrestling to get a lot more extreme as well. What is your take on that pivot? And it still exists. I don't think as big as it was, and some of the people that were in that world couldn't even really make the pivot to WWE because they were just too far gone.
Yeah, well, it's one of those. It's like any art form, really. It's like it's basically. It's explained to me once. It's like, well, deathmatch, as it's called, is the horror movies or the death metal of
Yeah.
of wrestling. It's like taking it to the extreme. Like people like a action movie, you might like watch a nice action movie, but
Can you
sometimes
talk
people
a
want
little
to
bit
watch
about what
blood
a
and
death
violence.
match? Can you talk a little bit about what a death match is? Because I think you have to really
So
explain what it is.
yeah, okay, fair enough. Yeah, so within wrestling, like a death match, I suppose, is an extreme, what we call a hardcore match. So people are familiar with wrestling, I guess, know that people hit each other with chairs and ladders and things like that. And then, okay, that's fine. And then the death match is taking that to the next level where it becomes almost instead of like a battle to see who's the strongest, it's just kind of a battle to see who's the toughest, really. And they
Mhm.
hit each other with various implements like glass light tubes, barbed wire, drawing pins, and all sorts of. I've been on some shows, these deathmatch shows, where there's some like the fans bring the weapons and they all sorts of
Jesus
horrible
Christ.
implements of torture. My favorite was a board that someone had just opened a load of tin cans on and stuck them to. Just like all the open tops of the cans are on the
Oh,
board. And it was just like, oh, it was like a polystyrene board with knives in it. And I was like, what is this madness?
what?
But the fans, it's one of those ones that the fans of it are dedicated fans. I know in England, this deathmatch company I work for called Rise, um, uh, they get people coming from all over the country to watch their shows because they love deathmatch. There's obviously a limited pool of deathmatch like places that will people that are willing to put on these shows. So, like in terms of my thoughts of it, I'm not against it. A lot of people hate it and say, "Oh, it's a bastardization of the sport." Blah blah blah. It's nothing but just murder porn kind of stuff. Although no one gets murdered. I know it's called deathmatch, but but yeah, like it's just people like with a blood fetish or whatever. I don't know. As I say, it's a further take on the idea of what wrestling is, a more extreme, blood sport, I guess, almost.
It's
But
funny that you
yeah,
say blood fetish because the whole thing is like bleeding. And like you guys remember going to school and there was those lights in the ceiling, those long, what do you call them? There's
yeah,
a name for those
we
lights.
call them strip lights
Strip
or
lights,
fluorescent
the
tubes.
tubes. Yeah, they're glass
Yeah, yeah.
tubes. So imagine people, you see a dude in a ring with this glass tube and he hits the other guy with it, so it just cuts him to shreds. Like these people are
It
cut
just
to shreds. Uh,
explodes. It explodes, and they make
explodes.
towers of these things, like huge constructions of these like light tubes. Another one of my favorites was a lazy boy wrapped in barbed wire. That was funny.
But another thing they do is they'll jump off the roof of a house, like a two-story roof of a house,
Hmm.
onto a table filled with these light tubes. Is it breaking kayfabe if you explain a little bit how this works? Because every time I see it, I'm like, why is this man's spine, not jellyfish? And I know these people are getting some severe injuries from this. All I did was
Well,
play. punk metal music and hang upside down and thrash my body and instruments around for years, and I can fart and pull a muscle. So I know these guys have some
I mean,
injuries.
well, it's the same kind of thing. It's a very punk like attitude, especially amongst these especially amongst these deathmatch. It's a really tight knit community
Mhm.
all over the world. Like, so there's been like talent trading between America and England in these deathmatch circles. Like, so there's a bunch of lads here called the Deathmatch Outlaws who are a little group of deathmatch wrestlers. Obviously, it's quite a small scene here in England, and they are regularly flown over to America to work for XPW and all these big promotions against like bigger deathmatch wrestlers, and they're swapping between it. Like, it's such a dedicated fan base that they
Mhm.
kind of make the scene like a punk scene or whatever, like a really like, okay, grassroots. We want to do this, and the fans wanting to watch it. Let's make it happen, kind of thing. Like,
It's so insane. I was watching a.
but in terms of them being injured and how they do it, I mean, it's a set like. I guess they just wake up in the morning and look down and go, "Well, I've got some massive balls of steel. I should probably just do this then."
Like
Oh, well, what else am I going to do with them?
I saw who was the black dude? New Jack,
Oh, New Jack, what that
who
man?
passed away not
Absolute
too long
legend.
ago. New Jack,
Unfortunately, so.
insane, right? And also too, when you look at this is what's interesting to me about wrestling, and I'd love to hear your take on this. When you look at guys before the merger, and the merger, of course, is Vince McMahon eating pretty much every promotion and then getting people on primetime television, right? Before the merger, look at the foreheads and the faces of wrestlers. Hulk Hogan, who's been wrestling for a gajillion years, has none of those indent scars
Uh,
in his
New
forehead.
Jack's New
You look
Jack's
at a
head
guy like
was
New Jack and look at all the wrestlers from the 70s and
Sandman,
80s.
Sabu.
You can put quarters in these scars because there was a thing in wrestling and they talk about it because I don't know if you guys do this anymore, but I'm sure maybe I don't know. But they would
Digging.
hide blades in their wristbands. And if you needed to cut somebody to bleed, you'd have your blade and you'd cut them and then there'd be blood or you'd know where to punch a person where they would bleed, right? And you look at these guys because of all the cuts, it's just the skin is just like, oh, it's just gnarled to shit.
Yeah,
And
the
I
idea
don't
is
you
that
don't
you
see
slice it
that as
just
much
above your.
anymore. Yeah,
No,
I'm
no.
looking
Well,
at you and your head is as smooth as
smooth.
baby
Well, I
Viana's over
don't.
there.
I don't get paid. I don't get paid enough to bleed, mate. I don't get paid enough to bleed. Not on my head, anyway. You know,
Somebody said
I
Dusty
definitely.
Rhodes' forehead looks like pages on a book. It's insane some of the scars you saw when you see the old
Yeah.
guys, but is that thing a little done now because you guys know, look, I
Well,
need this
yeah.
to make the real money.
I mean, well, yeah. I mean, nowadays, obviously, they don't do it in any of the big companies. They wouldn't go on TV, so it's not an essential thing. Uh, I mean, it depends. It's an art. I suppose it's an artistic thing, really. Like, do you think
Mhm.
blood belongs in wrestling? Obviously,
Oh.
there's dangers involved with it. Famously, Nigel McGuinness ended up getting hepatitis uh, from the ring and having to retire from active wrestling.
Wow.
Um, and that was after he'd been, signed for WWE. He'd been wrestling for years. So obviously there is a danger with it. I know all the deathmatch guys, they get tested and stuff before they do these shows. Obviously, with all that blood like flying about. But you say, "Oh yeah, it's an artistic thing." People go, "That's mad. That's insane." But people do whatever for their art. How much money and praise have the Jackass lads got, or things like that, for doing
Yes.
horrible things to their body
Yes.
and in the name of entertainment. So if it's just a little cut and uh blood, like a bit of bleeding from the forehead,
Mhm.
it depends on what your thought is. I think it's something that should be saved and should have a purpose. Like, there should be a reason why they're bleeding if they really hate each other, and it's down to the person at the end of the day. And it's an artistic decision, like your match is your story. So how you want to tell that story or what brushstrokes you want to put into it is up to you, really.
You paint a very beautiful picture right there, and I want to ask you.
Yeah,
Let's stay talking about New Jack. So there's a great wrestling series.
He was one as well. He was actually a talented wrestler. Like people know him for his like super violent stapling people's heads and shivving people and stuff. But he could actually wrestle and was a brilliant talker. And if he wasn't quite so out there, he could have really been successful. I think because he was like such an interesting and engaging character and actually quite talented. But well, yeah, he was also a bit of a loose cannon. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, yeah, as Rick James says, cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, there's a moment where, I think it's probably the most famous New Jack story, where there's a new kid, and I think he's called like the patrolman or something. Yeah, I think you know the story where the kid had lied about his age to wrestle. He was only 17, but he was a very large young man. And
Yeah.
he goes to New Jack, doesn't know anything about wrestling. He had lied about even how many amateur matches he had done. And he goes to New Jack and asks if he could beat him up a little bit because his parents were there or something like that.
I think
And
his wrestling name was something like Mass Transit or something like
Mass
it was.
Transit. That's what he was. He was a bus driver. Yeah,
That's
Mass
what it
Transit.
was.
Yeah.
I was like, what a strange name, but yeah.
And yeah, he had a whole bit with a little person, and so New Jack, and this is where it gets interesting. This is where we're talking about the art and assault. New Jack cuts the kid. He's like, I'll show you, because the kid says, I want to bleed. Let's make it look good.
Yeah.
And he had pissed New Jack off, and New Jack says he even prefaces it by saying that he was doing blow in the locker room before the kid walks up to him. So he's already pissed. And anyway, he takes a scalpel and slices the kid, damn near slices the top of his head off, and then starts to beat the shit out of him. And the kid's dad gets in the ring. They stop it, and you can see it. The ambulance comes, and I think the kid later died, but he not from that.
No.
He killed himself, like years down the road. But
Oh right. Oh, well, I don't know about that. Poor Mass Transit.
Yeah. He never, of course, he never wrestled again.
Well, I remember hearing the fallout of that show where so he stabbed the kid several times, and then the police asked. Apparently, this is the
Oh, that's
story
a
that I heard.
different story. That's a different one.
No.
Yeah, that's
Surely
a
not.
different
Is
one.
it?
That's a different one where the guy came to him before, same thing. Hey, let's make it look good. And I want to toughen you up. And New Jack's like, man, I'll show you what. And the guy put him in a hold too hard. And New Jack got mad, and you see him go in his pocket. That's what you're talking about. And he shanks the guy in the back like 5 times. And they called the police. They called the police. Yeah.
And then like on New Jack's story, it's like, this said I stabbed him 6 times. It's like, motherfucker, I stabbed him 9. It's like, wow.
He stabbed him, and they called the police, and New Jack went to jail. And while he's sitting in jail, the dude comes up to him and says, hey, I'll say it was all a part of the show. If you agree to go on tour, and we'll do a whole tour where, like, you stab me and I can be mad and get my revenge on you, and And New Jack was just like, I'll say whatever you want me to say.
Whatever you want. Yeah, of course, mate. Yeah. Sick. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, man.
Why wouldn't he? Of course. I like that. That blew my mind. No, yeah, I don't know what happened with the mass transit thing, because that's what I thought that was.
No, the mass transit thing, he literally cut the kid's head off. So the paramedics had stapled his top of his scalp on, and the kid had no idea.
Yeah.
And the little person was friends with the kid because they had a bit, and so he was riding with them. And I guess the kid's dad had called New Jack the N-word after all this is happening. And I was thinking to myself, like, that's like the least of what I would say to this man. Because, like, yeah, I don't give a shit what my kid is doing.
Yeah, if
I
he's
would be
getting his head
calling the
like
N-word while I was
chopped off.
stabbing the shit out of him. But you know,
Yeah.
and then that whole situation, the little person admits to not covering, but kind of admitting that, yeah, the kid had lied about his age and because they were trying to sue the promotion for letting this
Yeah, well,
16, 17-year-old kid wrestle.
yeah, I think it was his dad's. I think I remember hearing. I don't know. Yeah, it might be a different thing. I don't know. I heard it was like his promotion or something like that. Well, this
No,
is what I mean
it
about
was part of
wrestlers being.
ECW. It was an ECW
Oh, it
thing.
was part of the. Oh,
Yeah,
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 yeah, yeah.
yeah. It was still
Yeah.
ECW, but it was like, you know, they weren't pay-per-view big. And, you know, then there's the story of New Jack, who, again, back to the ECW, kind of how crazy it was. They're
Mm.
fighting in the rafters of an arena. And I don't know if you've ever been to the top of an arena, but or on a scissor lift. When you're
Well, I
that
mean,
high, everything, the slightest movement feels like you're swinging on a swing, especially if you
oh well,
pop. Yeah, go ahead.
in WCW they had the no, yeah. Back in the 80s, there was a Starcade 86 or something. They had scaffolding matches.
Yeah,
And they quickly stopped doing that where they're up massively high.
yeah.
But then when they got them up there, they realized, oh shit, we're really high up here. Like, I'm not fucking around like gonna fall off this. It's fucking gonna break my neck. So I mean, I did a show once in this like fashion show in Italy for
Mhm,
this fashion designer who wanted all this stuff going on in the background while his models walked around. And they originally wanted us in these cages, like suspended above the thing, like wrestling in these cages. And we're like, okay. So we're there on the day, they're like planning it all out. We go up in these cages, and they were only maybe 10, 15 feet off the ground. But as soon as we stepped in and started walking around, they were swinging around like it was like, oh my, there is no way. It was like like you were at Disneyland or something on some big
yeah,
ride, like
yeah,
going like
yeah.
that. It was like, there is no way we are fighting on in these while they're in the air. So we had to have them on the ground. So God knows what it'd be like fighting, like, on these in these rafters, or as I say, on these scaffoldings, things like that. I mean, when you get in the ring, you stand on the top rope. You think when you're looking at it, you're like, that's not that high. But when you're up there, you're like, oh, it's quite far, this. I'd rather, I'd rather not jump off this, like, but there you go.
You want to climb
That's
back down?
why, yeah. Well, usually at that point, you've got enough. You've got enough. Oh, everyone's watching me now. I suppose I can't really climb back down. Best just jump off then, like, just see where we go. That's why I always like to do a moonsault. You don't have to look where you're going then.
Well, okay. Well, let me ask you about that. Your first time in a ring. Let's go back to that first time in a ring.
Mm.
Walk me through. I would love to hear this from your perspective. Walk me through from the moment you're in the back and you're going to walk down that walkway into the ring. What are you feeling as you're walking down and you're hearing your name?
Oh, mate. Well, this is it. Like, wrestling is in a very, very was in a very poor state in England when I started wrestling.
Mhm,
So we were in a small like leisure centre, like basically a basketball court,
mhm.
uh, in front of maybe 50 people. It was in the afternoon, so there was none of the lights. I think it was a curtain in front of a door. So it's the worst thing, a pet hate of mine. And this is one from, doing these tiny shows and things, is where you've got to open your own like door and come out. It absolutely steals any star power you have. Like if you're trying to look like a big deal, you're trying to come out and go, I'm a superhero, I'm a wrestler, and then you've just got to open the door and walk out, be like, yeah, it is absolutely kills any kind of momentum. You're used to seeing, doors slide open, someone comes out, there's smoke or fire or something like that. No, you just open this leisure centre door, which probably has like a little window in it anyway. You walk out, absolutely ruins. So yeah, I was just really excited. Obviously, I was like, wow, this is going to be my first match. Like, I hope it goes well. It was a tag match, luckily, like, and a 6-man tag with a
Jesus.
few lads I'd trained with. So, well, I mean, when you're first wrestling, it's sometimes better to be in an environment like that because it's you've got more people around you to take care of you, less eyes on you.
Mhm.
Like, one thing is criminally done in England anyway. I don't know about America. Is people wrestling on shows in front of paying fans when they're not like fully trained to wrestle, and because there's
Mm.
no regulation or whatever, so you have like some promoter will be like, oh, I'll save money. I'll just put on this cheap match, 2 trainees who will work for free or there or thereabouts. And then that's some time spent, and it's a match on the card that I don't have to pay for, and it'll be an absolute abortion. Like red reels, like it'll fall apart, and luckily they might get out of it without injuring each other. And then people watch that and go, like, especially with British wrestling, you've got a crowd coming to watch it. Often they don't know much about wrestling, or they've seen it on the telly, they've seen a poster in their local chip shop, and they've gone, right, I'll take the kids. It might be fun. They like wrestling on the telly, and I'm not paying, 80 quid for a ticket to go see WWE when I can spend like a fiver and go to the local like community center, and they'll come and watch this match, and it'll be awful because it'll be 2 untrained pasty dudes in bad gear or t-shirts or whatever, and they'll just go, well, it was cheap but it was crap, so I'd rather just save my money for when WWE comes to town. And like it kills the town, as they say, because people will go, well, I went to a British wrestling show and it was rubbish, so I'm not going to go again, kind of thing. um, I know that wasn't really the question that you asked. It was about how my time was when I first came out. It was brilliant. Those 40 or 50 people rocked their world. I did the job. Um, it was actually surprisingly okay. It could have gone worse. I've seen some far worse first matches. But I took a while to train, and I already had a background. It does take a while to get it, and luckily, and with wrestling as well, the idea is best to train with as many people as possible because no one person has all the right answers.
Mm.
And
I
well,
feel the same way about
whether
music. I feel the same way about
well,
music.
yeah,
Play with as many people as
it's the
possible
same
every
as
time I
music.
can. Yep. Yep.
If there's, it's all subjective to it, but like there's lots of wrestling out there that's really popular now that I don't like so much. And I'm not saying their style is rubbish or whatever. It's like it's not for me.
Mhm.
Like with anything, I think wrestling should be like like almost like a cabaret show. Should have appeal to everyone. It can't just all be the same thing. Like if it was all just sports based grappling wrestling holds, then I'd watch UFC. Because if I was going to watch that, I was going to watch that. Or if it was all just drama talking, I'd watch a soap opera. Or if it was all comedy, I'd watch Saturday Night Live. You know what I mean? Like it's all those elements together in the show that
Mhm.
that make it engaging. I think it is like a variety act.
Storylines, storylines are important in wrestling. I do want to ask you something kind of in line with storylines. As you said earlier, that some of the beefs in wrestling are real. As now you're an elder statesman of the sport, you're a veteran, if you will. If a young buck comes up to you and you're in the ring, and let's say they they give you what do they call them? Receipts.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
a receipt is what you give to someone who. Oh, I shouldn't be revealing this kind of stuff, but yeah, it's someone.
Here, I'll say, I'll give you the out. I'll give you the out. So let's say you're in the ring with somebody and they just connect on a punch a little too real, and they done fucked up and
Potato.
broke your nose. Maybe they really fucking, cracked you in the eye socket. Maybe they did a hold the wrong way and twisted your knee. And if this happens, you're out of work. And if you're out of work, you're out of money. And if you have a day job, maybe you can't even do the day job now. So the receipt is what you give that person back for that shot they took. So it's like, oh, bruh, let me give you this receipt.
Hmm.
Have you ever handed out receipts in your career?
I, I have a couple of times. I've been on the receiving end of a few receipts myself, actually. Actually, one of the first times I wrestled for All Star, that promotion I was telling you about, was the biggest one um, in England at the time, biggest touring promotion and stuff. So I was in there. I was quite excited. I'm working for Brian Dixon. I'm just in a Rumble spot, and I'm there. I come in all fire and fury, and I turn. I start fighting with this guy, Tony Spitfire, who's one of his top men, an experienced veteran, and I get him in the corner and I just lay him up and give him a massive chop across the chest, and he just looks at me like a shit in his cereal. I was like, "Fucking hell, bitch! Why owe you fucking money?" And then spins me round and then absolutely lays the shit out of me and was like, "Don't you know fucking chops in the fucking rumble? You know what I mean, Gudge? We got fucking red tomorrow. You've built me chest up, like." So like yeah, so you learn fast as well, and that's again one of the road things. Because you're on the road for all this time, you do end up like, you see, that might have cost me a mile, as they say, like,
Mhm.
so like a punishment kind of thing. So if you're late for a ring job, like, so you're setting up the ring, as I say, and you turn up late, all right, it's fine for you, you're 10 minutes late, but you've missed out on carrying all the steel and wood boards and all that kind of stuff. So they'll go, right, you get a mile, like, you used to run a mile in your underwear, and it was part of the kind of Uh, like initiation, kind of, not quite initiation, but part of the kind of rules. And it's kind of died off now because people don't like any of that kind of like initiation or like hazing kind of aspect of things. Um, which I get, but I think traditionally within British wrestling, it comes from having to spend 6 to 8 weeks with these same people in like a close knit environment. And if someone is always late for the ring job, always dodging this, or never washes the gear, so every time you wrestle them, they smell like shit and get
Mhm.
progressively worse, or they never help out with this, or they're really tight, then it will only amplify and get more annoying as the weeks go on. So you kind of have these punishments to keep people in line and eventually go, okay, right, I will wash my gear, I will turn up for the ring job on time, and all these kind of things. But now it's kind of, it's a different world now. Like wrestling is, as I say, it used to be full of all these weird drifter characters. Like Les Kellett was a famous British wrestler. Like among a certain age bracket, he's absolutely legendary as one of the nicest, like funniest men on TV. He used to do this funny wrestling like routine, but in real life, he was the most horrible man in the world and was just this disgusting pig farmer who like once turned up with like a big pig bite on his hand that had got so infected that it just swollen up. His hand was like a boxing glove. So what he did
Oh.
was he just said, just step on it, just stamp on it, and got this guy to stamp on his hand and squeeze all the goo out of it. So it's full of all
Oh.
these kind of weird characters who are, and nowadays it's all normal people. So I just don't think you get as many like like wild stories as you used to.
Why do you
Because
think that is?
I mean, well, it's like anything. Everything becomes more accessible and easier, and like it's not the murky like Wild West of what it once was. Traveling like from town to town. It's a bit, as they say in America, it's a bit carny, wasn't it? Like wrestling
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
traditionally these guys like floating around different towns doing whatever, and now everything is all recorded, and like wrestling is obviously more of a like a well-produced show. Like the WWE is an unbelievably slick like TV product,
Yes.
and that's what people are used to watching now. It's not like dusty halls like watching territory wrestling from the 80s and things like that. It's just a very different game now, like to what
I
it
think
was,
you'll
and
like
maybe it's lost some of the charm, but like there's no doubt that in terms of the athleticism, the actual wrestling is still great. It just Yeah, I just don't think you'll get those characters, those stories that you used to get of all these, like the Ric Flairs, Macho Mans,
ooh.
um, any of these kind of people who have these larger than life personalities. That I mean, and maybe that's why wrestling isn't quite the hot button it once was, because that reality of like, I believe that Ric Flair was this like insane styling, profiling, jet flying, Rolex wearing kind of guy. Do you know what? I think he kind of was. I don't think you're wrong in that. Whereas I don't know. I think there's a reality that's been lost to wrestling, which I think makes it harder to connect to.
Is that why we glorify the good old days?
I think so.
The
Well, I
good
don't
old
know. I
days
think
where people were getting murdered in the dressing rooms.
yeah. Well, I mean, as horrible as it was, it's interesting, isn't it? Would you rather hear the tale of people fighting in the backstage, you know, taking drugs and planning to murder each other and sleeping in each other's wives, or would you like to hear about them, like, you know, doing TikToks and streaming on Twitch, like, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying, you know, when I read their like biography, it's not quite going to be the same as like reading like I don't know Shawn Michaels' biography as it will be reading. I'm not going to name any current wrestlers because I'm sure they're all
Contemporary
sound. You know what I
wrestler
mean?
X who lives a good
Yeah.
life. They're
Who
also,
lives
you
a
know,
good life
also
and there's some.
they're also a lot
Yeah, yeah.
smaller, right? They're a lot smaller than they were because there's not a lot of juice.
Well, yeah, they obviously get tested for the juice nowadays. The juice is loose.
There's not as much juice as you saw back in the day. Like I was watching, so we had to compile tons of stock footage because I'm narrating this story, right, or this tale. I'm going to play a clip later of the documentary, and we had to find all this footage. And I knew of a lot of stuff, but I wanted to get a lot of footage before the big merger. There's more than you think out there of because a lot of this stuff was televised locally. So there's like a lot of Canadian promotions that were televised locally. It's a lot of smaller promotions, so you can see people like way, way, way before. And I feel like everybody that was wrestling back then was just jacked.
Jacked out of their minds on the Magoo.
Oh
Like,
my god! You like Lex Luthor. I forgot. And for those watching the show, I'm hoping that I'm talking to wrestling fans here. I forgot about the Miss Elizabeth Lex Luger storyline, and I was watching a thing on Macho Man Randy Savage, and they're talking about the whole Lex Luger thing because you know Miss Elizabeth died at Lex Luger's house because I don't think they were married, but they were dating and they were doing a bunch of drugs. I never even knew. I thought Elizabeth was like peak white woman. Like if you looked in the dictionary for what a white woman is, it's Mrs. Bajlan and then and then Miss Elizabeth.
yeah,
And to find out that she's like yacked out of her mind on pills and coke and drinking with Lex
yeah.
Luger, who was this massive man. And you see him now, Dara, and he's like my size.
Oh, is it? I thought he was
Oh,
still pretty
it's all
jacked.
gone. It's all gone.
Mm.
It's all gone.
Well, I
And not
mean,
juiced up.
it's ridiculous back in the day. Like the amount, like people like Warlord and Barbarian and all these people are unbelievably huge. Like even like you see it. The biggest thing is the people who are still wrestling now. So in the like late '90s, like Billy Gunn.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Billy Gunn, the ass man, obviously was member of D-Generation X, and he
Yeah.
was one of the like kind of mid-sized, small guys. And then he's in AEW now, and when he's on telly, he is enormous. He's just a giant, giant man. And like it was like, wow, the scale of the people back then, like even in the '90s, was still huge compared to now. Like
Huge. Huge.
absolutely, like huge, huge. Like you know, everyone's 6'6". Like even if you think of someone who didn't seem that massive, but like Jake the Snake, Jake Roberts is a phenomenally huge man.
Yes.
He is 6'6", and like he
Yes.
was never obviously a body guy. You'd never look at him and go, "This is one of this is Ultimate Warrior kind of thing." It was like, but he was a massive, just a scale of person that was just huge,
Scott
and
Hall,
like,
another big dude.
yeah, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, like
Oof.
Undertaker, Kane. These people are beyond that. Even like Randy Orton, obviously a bit newer, like only the last 20 years. Um, he's another one who's deceptively huge because he's kind of in proportion. So he's not like that massive, like super roided out physique.
Mhm.
He's kind of like in proportion, looks like a normal person. So you see him on telly and go, "Oh yeah, there's a man in good shape." And then in real life, he's 6'8", and you're like, oh no, he's like 6'5" or something. He's
Mhm.
huge, like absolute giant of a man. Like if he walked into a room, you would immediately go, well, what do they call it? The airport test for a wrestler. If you walk through an airport, you want people to go, "Who's that guy? He must be
Oh,
something
these
odd."
cats. So again, doing the access thing, I didn't know. I'm going to sound like an idiot as a Bay Area native. I didn't know that most of the island wrestlers are from the Bay Area. So when The
All
Rock
right.
was there, his whole family was there. I don't know. All the people are like kin. So
Like there's
and someone was
that
getting.
whole wrestling family. They're all connected, all of
Yeah,
them. Like
I had
all of
no
those
idea they
island.
were all connected. All those island people were all connected, and they were out in
Yeah,
droves, and they're all giants. All
yeah,
of them.
massive, massive.
Women were
Well, again, like
giants.
there's,
Yeah.
but again, yeah, again, what you say is obviously down to steroids is obviously a part of it as well.
Mhm.
Since obviously the the court cases in the late '90s, mid '90s, and stuff, they introduced obviously a wellness policy. They test for steroids nominally. So you see that really, how come The Rock at like 45 is now bigger than he's ever been?
Mhm.
Now, questionable.
Energy drinks,
How?
man. It's just energy
I
drinks.
mean, energy drinks are good. Like, uh, he's either been given like a set of, he's had like a bull testicle like transplant or something, or he's definitely taking himself some steroids in his time, because there's just no way a man suddenly gets bigger who was already a huge man,
Mhm.
get bigger than he's ever been. And
A
like
man that
that's,
played football at a high level.
yeah,
He played
and he
Division I
suddenly,
football at Miami.
yeah, it's like college football, isn't it? I don't think
Ah,
he played like,
he played high Miami when he was playing for the University of Miami. That was a junior NFL team. Damn near everybody from
mm,
that team went to the league, and it's a lot of those people from that team are in the Hall of Fame. So that's really high level athletics. He
yeah,
was
well, I
big
mean,
then. He got larger and when he wrestled, but he wasn't cut. And you look at him now, and we're the same age. And you're gonna tell me a guy that's the same age as me is that much bigger because he got smaller for a while for some of the
yeah,
roles
yeah,
he had on
he dropped a
television.
lot of weight, like, and then just got like bigger, and like that just doesn't happen because you don't get
No.
bigger. It like your testosterone levels drop in your like
Yes.
30s kind of thing.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
just no way without. Well, it's like, and that's part of it. Back in the '90s, I remember speaking to a wrestler who was in WWE in the Attitude Era, and he said he took steroids pretty much non-stop for 10 years.
Mm,
And again, he was a big fella, but like like big and thick and but not huge.
mhm.
You wouldn't go, oh, that man was jacked. Like he was in phenomenal shape, but like, and that's just the level that he had to keep up as one of the smaller guys on the roster. Like, obviously now there are ways around it. Like any sports team or any athletes or whatever, they're all trying to do one to take performance enhancing drugs and take steroids and get away with it. Like, so they'll probably do. I mean, I'm not saying this does happen, but it wouldn't surprise me if people were like, to certain like wrestlers and things, they'd be going, "We're going to do a drug test in 6 weeks." So, just letting you know, there's a drug test in 6 weeks. So,
Give you enough time to get it out of your system.
yeah, yeah, basically.
You finished your
Oh, they,
cycle.
yeah, yeah, that kind of thing. Like,
And finish your
I don't
cycle,
think it's
fellas.
as I don't think it'd be with everyone. It's not a blanket thing, but I think there'd be like some people. They're like, right, you're going away. Or like these, they've got these people on special contracts, like Brock Lesnar or whatever,
Mhm.
who they can go, yeah, you're on a certain special contract where we don't have to test you, so you do whatever you want. So they can just come in. Or I don't know how it works, but
Interesting.
it's it's like in Hollywood as well. Like people were going, "Oh, what's this Thor diet? How do I look like, Hetfield?" Or back in the day, like it was, how do you get like that 300 diet? I want to look like 300. Or the best one, my favorite is, how did Christian Bale go from The Machinist to doing Batman? Because he was like 90 pounds in The Machinist, and then he was like 230 in Batman.
Mm.
Steroids. That's
Yeah,
how he done it.
yeah,
They all take steroids because they don't
yes.
get tested. So it's like, fuck it, I'm gonna pile on loads of size. It ain't protein shakes, brother. You know what I mean?
New
So,
and other people go, well, they have personal trainers and dietitians. Sure, I don't doubt that.
yeah,
What do you think those people are
and
getting?
that in a couple of years that would put on a lot of size. But
Mm.
if it's in a couple of months, yeah, yeah,
There's no way in the world.
nah,
And
man,
these guys are
no way, man.
Will Smith in his 50s is more ripped than he ever was in his life. You gonna look at me and tell
Oh
me that
yeah.
this guy's not taking juice? F out of here.
Well, yeah, I remember when that like Rambo film came out. No, it wasn't Rambo.
Yeah.
He got busted, didn't
He
he?
got
Like,
busted. It was Rambo. It
but
was like Rambo 15, whatever it was. Yeah, yeah. He got
yeah,
busted
it
with
was
with growth hormone.
loads. Because I remember my mate was telling me before, because it was like Rocky Balboa had come out, and he was just
Mhm.
like, "Oh, mate, you should see Stallone. He looks absolutely jacked." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I bet he is. To be fair, because I've just seen that he's been smashing in loads of steroids. But you know, fair play to him. If it's what you want to do, and I suppose that's the question, like whether it should be, acceptable within wrestling. And I think obviously, like anything, it leads to abuse, but it's not a competitive sport, so it's not cheating as such. It's more, a case of the safety of the performers. And I know obviously in America you can get there is a lot of these clinics and stuff where they'll be able to manage your steroid use like properly, so it wouldn't become an issue. So in that sense, I guess it wouldn't be an issue. And as you kind of said before, you want to see a baseball player who can like hit the ball 900 yards because he's jacked out of his head.
Mhm.
But I understand also the concern of like the safety of the people like doing it, because you don't want to encourage that kind of, you have to take steroids to get this far. So like, where does the line draw? Like, and I see that's a bit of a difficult one to kind of reconcile. But yeah, because in theory, like, yeah, it shouldn't really matter if you take steroids or not. But then by not putting any control on it, it just says take steroids if you want to be,
Well,
because of the
did you
look and thing they're trying to achieve.
did you watch I don't know if they played it, I know Netflix is different in where you're at, but did you ever watch American Gladiators? I know you have Gladiators in the UK.
I think yeah, I know you've got American Gladiators. I know there's like a documentary about
There's
it
a
or something that's
documentary and
on
they
Netflix.
talk about they're like, man, we
Yeah,
were all juiced out of our minds. They started drug testing us
yeah,
because
yeah,
the wrestling thing happened. What's interesting to me about the whole argument around steroids, and obviously, I'm
yeah.
steroid free over here. But what's interesting to me about it is when the WWE thing came out, and this is before baseball has their whole steroid flare up thing. It was a scandal of sorts that Vince McMahon was allegedly peddling juice to the players. It never was a scandal that these guys were doing just copious amounts of cocaine. Same thing with
Yeah, I
baseball.
suppose.
Like nobody cared these guys were literally they had two types of coffee in the dugout, one that had speed in it and one that was just regular coffee. But
Well, I
steroids
was
is what
going to
they were
say, like,
really concerned about.
I mean, that affects what they're paid to do. Like,
Mhm.
I suppose if they're all taking coke on the match days or whatever, when they're partying afterwards, that's their business, really. Um, like, it's what affects them when they're on the field, I suppose, which people can have a problem with. So if they're going, oh well, they shouldn't be taking steroids because it's giving them an edge. It's no different. Like, it's their business if they want to take drugs. Like, if it's someone else's business, like they don't need all their affairs and things or sexual deviancy exposed to the world just because they're a sports team. As long as it's legal, then if they're cheating on their wife with 100 women, that's their business, and
Yeah.
it's got nothing to do with us really. But if they're like sleeping with the manager of like a rival team, then you'd be like, now this is my business.
It's
Now
the
I feel like,
strategy.
yeah, like now I feel this is getting, unfair like advantages are being built up.
But isn't it
Uh,
an unfair? Like I gotta look at it like this: if we're talking about competitive advantage or whatever, and again, Barry Bonds struck out. He popped out. He grounded out. He didn't hit a home run every time. And a lot of the pitchers he was facing was on juice as well. Kind of like Lance Armstrong and even Ben Johnson, the track star from the 90s, late 80s Olympics. Can't remember what year that was, where I think everybody but one person that raced in that race where he had set the record, which eventually got broke by Usain Bolt, for the 100-meter dash, all popped hot for steroids at different points in their career, all but one person, and it was the person that finished last. So I mean, it kind of speaks to the fact that a lot of people are using this stuff, and there's other things that people are using too, and especially when it comes to something like baseball, where there's such a grind, right? And even with wrestling, you're talking about a grind. You're talking about, and then I'm just getting this from what you're talking about, and then thinking about my life doing something nowhere near as violent, but still heavy on your body. Loading equipment up the 2 flight or down 2 flights, depending on the venue. This shit sucks, right? Heavy equipment, you got to load it by yourself. Long ass drives in uncomfortable situations where your body is stagnated for 6, 7, sometimes 8 hours in a car. Do you have time to stretch, exercise, work out? You're not eating well at all when you're doing this kind of stuff. I'm not saying I'm all for people destroying their body with hard substances. I understand people doing some bumps. Okay, we got to get up for the match. These people want to show. I mean,
well,
that's the kind
especially
of dark reality of the world that we're talking about.
it's true. It's not too different. Like with wrestling, as I say, when we're on the Butlins tours, or as I say, or any of these holiday camp tours, it'll be the same. You take the ring down, uh, you put it up, you set off to the next town. You're in a car journey for 4 or 5 hours, cramped up, usually with 4 or 5 other giant men. You get out. And you don't have time to stretch off. You might be late or whatever. You've got to set up the ring. You've got to go get ready. Say one of the things, you've got to be able to wrestle at any time. Like there's always everyone's wrestler. The wrestler dream, as they say, is you hear your entrance music and you're still doing your boots up, and that's like the anxiety wrestler dream.
Mhm.
But so there is a lot of uh the same kind of strain on your body not being able to stretch off properly, and I think that's where a lot of injuries come from in that, and the repetitiveness of it as well.
Mhm.
Like a professional boxer might have how many fights in a year? Like
5.
five.
And that's a busy year.
That's a busy
Yeah.
year. As I say, like I did a 2 week stint. Um, no, it wasn't even 2 weeks. It's 10 days. 10-day stint in 2020, and I did 22 matches.
Mm. Mm.
It takes its toll. And I was the bad guy as well. I was getting the shit kicked out of me like regular. So by the end of that, I was pretty why when people take like steroids and stuff, it helps with the recovery,
Yeah.
like growth hormone. Obviously it helps you be able to keep going. And as you say, if you're not working, if you're injured, you're not earning money. So the slide of like all these wrestlers into taking opioids, painkillers, just going, I can get through this, or just sometimes you see these guys, every part of them is taped up. It's just like I've got to tape everything up, got to
Mhm.
stretch off for ages just to be able to get through it. So I can see where the need to take these kind of things, like beyond simply the aesthetic of going, right, okay, I want to look good. Um, there is that factor of like helping you heal and stuff like that, like helping you like, giving you that strength that you require. So what's the so like
Yes,
I can see where
somebody
the
says if
benefits are.
high end boxers fight. Thank you for that comment. Virtuoso says, Diablo, I got news for you. Boxers today, at least the high profile ones, usually fight once a year. So weight cutting and cycling off could be easier. That's insane. That's
That's
insane.
exactly. And so like, with traditionally with like wrestling, you might be able to go on and off for a bit. So like with TV wrestling, you're on TV every single week. You've got to look good. There's no off season. Like even professional bodybuilders, there is a season to it where they're like, oh, okay, now I'm going to be off. Like I'm going to get off the gear for a bit, rehab, bulk, all that kind of stuff. Now a lot of these can't do it because if they're not on in season, they've got like a YouTube or something like that, or a content creator, so they can't go on there and go, I'm looking fat today because I'm not on gear and I'm just like taking it easy. They've always got to look, absolutely jacked. Like so, I don't know. Like in terms of wrestling, um, I think the steroid use has kind of dropped off. But I think in terms of real life, more people are taking steroids than ever. Like it's a weird,
Yes. Yes. I was talking to your brother
like,
about this.
like you
Yes.
go into a gym and the amount of
Yeah.
people who are just like, oh, I take gear. Like, but why? It's like, well, I want to look good. It's like
For who?
you don't need to take gear to look good. Just
Do
it's
some
like, yeah, but
push-ups.
I mean, obviously, yeah, you got to work with it. Like, you can't just take it and sit down and eat pies all day. But so there's a certain amount of effort. But like, still, it's like, what is your purpose for taking this drug beyond just looking good? Like, if I decided to take steroids and I was like, right, okay, say I was like 25 and I was like, right, I want to go to the WWE and
Mhm,
I don't think I can quite reach that level. I'm going to take gear so I look bigger and stronger, whatever. But
mhm.
that's a purpose or whatever. I get it. Or if I was a bodybuilder or I was a power lifter or something, I can understand it. But if you're just some random dude, just like I'm going to the gym and I want to get big, take steroids. Like to me, I'm just like, what's the point? That's like going, I'm going to get in my helicopter to go to Tesco, or go to the corner shop. Like a big overreaction. Like I don't see the point.
Well, does that
But
speak
I
to
suppose that I
well,
was
let
going
me
to say,
ask
I guess
go
that's
ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
like, yeah, like I suppose it's the internet culture, things like that. Everyone can see everyone, and everyone looks perfect and amazing. So it's like, unless you've got shredded abs and like huge arms and whatever, like then you're in shit shape. So maybe it's like a personal view kind of thing. I just think it's weird. It's like as wrestlers have got smaller, people have got bigger for some reason. So that's a weird.
But does that speak to kind of this moment, to your point that we're in, of I call it influencer culture, right? Where everybody
Mm,
can influence anything and we're judged by the amount of engagement that we can get. So, I also feel that sometimes people are afraid, like terrified to say the wrong thing. Um,
mm.
when I see these videos of under 18s taking gear and they're doing the
That's
transformation videos, right? Like, oh, this is me before gear as a 15-year-old weakling, and this is me a year later at 16, and they're just jacked. And they have millions of followers. And again, I don't know how much of that is paid for or real. But still, it does kind of speak to an interesting moment that we're in. That again, back when we talk about those early days of wrestling, when maybe guys were bigger, but they were also a little rounder. And
yeah, yeah. There was
there was a working class aesthetic, regardless of the gimmick, to the people that we were watching on the screen. And have we just moved so far beyond that now that we're just in a fantasy land, and fantasy land is our fake reality?
yeah. Like I'm not. Yeah, that's not a bad shout actually. It's like there was a realistic edge to it. Because even like, so you'd get a bodyguard, you'd get like an Ultimate Warrior or something.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, this man is ridiculously huge. But then there'd be a lot of people who looked, more normal, bigger guys, whatever. Like the early UFC as well. You used
Hmm.
to have all sorts of weirdos turn up
Hmm.
in the UFC, and then over time, that's kind of like been honed down to, if there's like a UFC physique now, where if you were like, oh yeah, he looks
Interesting.
like a UFC fighter,
Yeah.
like the way he's built and the way, like, because it's become its own thing. It's not just some guy down the pub fighting a taekwondo kid from like Korea. It's very much its own thing. Like,
Mhm.
so I think wrestling now, yes, it's such a slick product. It has become a bit more like there is a certain wrestler. I mean, it's not quite as strict. Obviously, you get different types of people, but there is like especially in the mid noughties as well. There was a phase where just everybody looked the same, and
Mhm.
there was just everyone had to have sculpted abs, be
Mhm.
tall, and like and just be like really shredded. And now they're kind of relaxed on it. I think people like that kind of seeing these different people. For I always liked it anyway. It's almost like Street Fighter or something like that. I want to see like back in the day. I want to see Yokozuna fight Bret Hart. There, I was like, how is Bret Hart going to slam Yokozuna? He's way too big. Like, and it's
Mhm.
that kind of drama as a kid that I quite like. Whereas if everyone looks the same, it's not as interesting. And
You
that's
can't you
like
can't
the
tell the
whole.
difference. You can't tell the difference. They're all NPCs, as you guys say.
Yeah, wrestling and UFC are different things. If I wanted to watch like real fighting, I
Mhm.
would, I'd watch UFC. And the reason why like some people don't like UFC or people don't understand it is because it can end up with two guys on the floor,
Mhm.
and if you don't know what they're doing, it's not very exciting. It's two guys just kind of
True.
cuddling on the floor. It looks like, but
That's true.
like if you know what you're looking for, you're like, oh, this is a really good fight. Like,
Mhm.
oh, it's side control, blah blah blah. But if you don't, you're just looking and you go, there's two guys on the floor, kind of. Oh, that guy's trying to kick that other guy's legs for ages. This kind of stuff. So it's not as exciting. Well, whereas the whole point of wrestling is to be exciting and engaging. So they can cut out all the like less exciting stuff to and like tailor it to be an entertaining watch. But there has to be a certain level of realism so people can suspend their disbelief. If you know what I mean. I can't remember where I was going with that now.
No, no, no. That's true, and that's what makes for me as someone that again putting this whole full feature length. This whole project I started off doing was going to be like 10,
Mm,
15 minutes long, and 10, 15 minutes turned into an hour and a half. Documentary juxtaposing wrestling and media, but going down the rabbit hole of trying to find footage and rewatching matches, and then finding a lot of old interviews to dig up to get stuff to use as well. Um, it's just really interesting to see the influence that pro wrestling has on, in my opinion, kind of the way we consume media. There's good guys and bad guys, and the way that we're drawn into the drama of the good guys and bad guys, and how you talk about suspending your belief for a minute. That's kind of how we see the world. You know? Like
yeah, yeah,
watch
wrestling. Like,
any presidential election. I don't care if it's Brexit or the election of Donald Trump, uh, and then watch pro wrestling.
oh yeah,
Very,
like
very
the
similar.
parallels.
Yeah.
Well, think you presidential debates and things like that. You get two people standing in a room, trash talking each other,
Mhm.
just like on wrestling. And when it was Trump and Hillary, it was very much like wrestling. Like you know, they will talk to. There's all the political theatre, the entrance, like whether chicken and egg, which has influenced which. I don't know. Probably wrestling has influenced it and have gone, wow, this is the kind of reactions that we need to be getting. So, it's a popularity contest. And wrestling follows like well established themes of how to get over with a crowd. The whole thing of it is how do we get the crowd to do what we want? We want them to like this guy or hate this guy. And it's up to both of them to, sway the crowd that way. And there's a lot of psychological techniques and tricks and things to make people lean one way or another. And like, any politician worth of salt who wants to talk in front of a crowd would want to steal those kind of techniques and methods to get over with a crowd, basically. Like,
Somebody says, bad lefty says, is the WWF to blame for Trump? Yes.
Pretty sure, yeah.
Yes. Yes,
At
I
least
say that.
partly.
You don't have Donald Trump the way he's Donald Trump without Vince McMahon. They've been friends for a long time. They actually have
Oh
parallel
yeah.
stories of upbringings from well-to-do families. Um, yeah, you don't have the contemporary Donald Trump without Vince McMahon's influence and, excuse me, the roar of the crowd. The roar of the crowd is the most addictive drug that
Well,
anybody
think of the
can have.
like the whole of the like the 90s kind of like the way that like media is now, especially social media. So it was all based on like outrage, people like going,
Mhm.
what is this clickbait, blah blah blah. And that all it all stems from the kind of 90s Jerry Springer shock jock kind of
Yep.
stuff, which is the same thing that wrestling was doing at the time. Like, we're going to go out here and say wild stuff. And like as a kid, I was growing up going to the playground and you're going, you never guess what Goldust did on Raw last night. It's like, no way. Are you kidding me? Are you
Yeah.
telling me Miss Kitty got her boobs out on Raw last night? This is bonkers, and like all sorts of madness. So like, and yeah, seeing all that and the influence it has, it's got to have affected, like, I guess, like the way that politicians handle themselves and how they get. Well, yeah, Donald Trump, obviously, everything he said was divisive. Like, you couldn't move without every word or tweet that he ever made being analyzed by everyone. And it's because he'd say these things. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
These
it's time in the
insane. Yeah.
WWE, and as a member of the Hall of Fame, it ain't no Hall of Fame. He's a member of the Hall of Fame, the
He's in the Hall of
WWE Hall of
Fame.
Fame. Yeah,
He's in the
man,
Hall of
ain't
Fame. What do you do?
ain't no Hall of
And
Fame.
that's kind of, and that was kind of my point for the whole thing. I was been watching some stuff and I've been writing a bunch of stuff and I just got done doing this real big project and I was burnt out and someone contacted me and said, "Hey, if you ever need help, I like your film stuff. If you ever need help." And I was like, "You know what? I'm working on this thing and I would need your help." And then me and this young man who's only 27. So he doesn't have the wrestling now. He doesn't remember. He didn't grow up with, WWF and
Yeah,
NWA and
yeah.
all the pre WWE promotions that I did. But he still understood the 90s and the Attitude Era stuff, and he knew who The Rock was and Steve Austin, and it's been a fun project to work on with this young man. And just going back down the rabbit hole of this stuff, and then also remembering the 2016 election, remembering Brexit, even remembering the 2020 election, putting all those things into it, you really just see not just the way that it plays out, because I think these things become natural, right? Whereas wrestling, everybody gets a script. I'm not saying Joe Biden and Donald Trump get a script. They don't really need one. They abide by it because they know how everything works.
Well,
And
it's still real to them, damn
yeah,
it.
yeah,
You
yeah.
they're
It's
not.
still real to them.
They
Yeah,
don't need the script because they genuinely believe what they say, I guess. So like, but they know how to. Well, I guess they have people telling them, if not themselves, whoever their people are, telling them how they need to say, what will get the best optics, what will get the best coverage. Because don't you always say, like the people have made up their minds. They just want to hear, like, you're unlikely to change people's mind, like voters' minds in America and stuff. But you've got to just say what people want to hear, so they go, yeah, okay, that's the man that I want, kind of thing.
and
I don't know.
yeah, and everybody knows. Look, you go up to anybody, there's not one person in the street. Is this real or fake wrestling? And maybe they'll answer the question, but it's not about real or fake. And that's in doing this project, what I kind of came to realize this isn't about real or fake. Because even with politics, no one believes politicians,
It's a shit match.
right? Like you said, they're
Are
just
these policies
saying
real or fake?
nobody cares. We
Yes.
can go to an arena filled with 80,000 people that are there to watch a wrestling match. There's not one person there over the age of 8 that thinks that it's real. They don't care. They would probably get mad at the question. They're not there for that. just like the people that are politically engaged, they're not there for real. Or is this man really going to roll out this policy that's going to change my life?
Mm.
No, they are there for the theater. They are there
Mm.
to be entertained. And that's the frightening part of both those things, right?
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
So,
Well, that's it. I mean, there's no like vote, like, seems like voter like confidentiality is not a thing. Like, people are just like, I'm a vote Trump. I'm wearing a T-shirt saying that I'm a vote Trump. So there we are. There's no like,
yeah,
okay. And then once you're at that point where you're literally wearing the T-shirt, like, of whoever it is you're supporting, then I think changing that person's mind is going to be one uphill task.
yeah,
So,
because
like,
again,
it is, as you say, it's there for the theatre. They go to there to watch. They want to see their hero, Donald Trump, say some things. Like, people want to go. Like, people will pay money to go see Raw because they know Sting is going to be on. Well, he's not, but yeah, you know what I mean.
yeah,
Sting is
yeah,
going to be on Raw today. Is he going to wrestle? No, he's a 60-year-old man. He's just going to talk. I don't care. I just want to see Sting. Or like, I just want to go and see it. Or people will pay to the access to go and see, like, head shrinker, whatever, from the island, like from 40 years ago. So I just want to see him. And it's the same, I guess, with the political theaters. I'm going to go see Trump because he's my main man and he's going to say some stuff, or
mhm.
whoever. I don't even know. I don't
Yeah,
even know who's in your elections
whoever is
nowadays.
running the thing, whoever's
Yeah,
running the
yeah.
thing is going to say the thing that I want them to say, and they're going to
So
talk about the people that I hate, and that's all I want to hear.
it's like you
That's
never
all
hear.
it
I
is.
don't know. I've never heard at like one of these political rallies. Someone's gone, right. New policy is this, and then like the audience go, "Ooh, oh, we don't like that one. That's not a good one." There's not like a round booth, and they go, "Okay, we'll work on that one." It's always, "Yeah, this is great." Like, so I don't know. Maybe people are hitting that 100% batting average. I'm not sure.
I'm excited for you guys to watch this. But first of all, look, I want to say this. We've been talking to you for almost 2 hours. I know it's later where you are. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Dara, for hanging out with us. Oops, wrong.
Fuck you, man.
Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate it. I was a
No
little
worries.
nervous to do this without your big brother. I was like, Gene, you're
Yeah.
gonna be with me. He's like, oh no, I figure you would. And I was like, okay, that's how you're gonna do me. All right,
Why is he? Why is he?
that's
Well, I
fucked
don't know. He's just
fucked
playing
up.
with the kids, I guess.
You know what it is? You
Oh,
put him in a chokehold last time he was in the UK and fucked him up, and he was like, I will never.
so, well, once you take a trip down the A63, it's all over, mate. That's all I can say. Check me out on YouTube, on Instagram, on all the favorite social media sites.
Well, look, Gene linked you wherever you want to find Dara Diablo. We have links in the description so you can find Dara. Dara, where's the best place for people to find you?
I guess Instagram, you can find me, Dara Diablo. That's probably the best way. I believe I've got Facebook as well. I don't really do Twitter because I'm old and I don't really understand it.
That's fair.
I've tried to. It just, I feel it's a minefield that'll only end up with me getting in trouble. So I'm just gonna leave
uh, are you wrestling right now? Because it is summertime.
it. Currently not, because unfortunately I suffered an Achilles tendon rupture earlier this year.
So you're
So I've
done.
been on the
You're done
shelf.
for a year.
I've been out for several months. I've got a few months before my return, unfortunately. So I have not wrestled for almost a year, yeah, now, which is sad. As I've said, there's a lot of good things going on in England at the minute. Um, a lot of like positive things within the British scene. A lot of great young wrestlers coming up at the minute. Um, and yeah, it's actually getting quite an exciting time because after lockdown it was a bit slow, like
Mhm,
coming back.
mhm.
There was a lot of big changes within the British wrestling scene, and then it's finally started to find a bit of a groove again. I mean, as with all of these things, it's up and down like that. So it'll probably the bubble will burst, but it's hard being on the sideline watching things grow and going, "Oh, I wish I was there at the time." But c'est la vie.
You're still doing it, so
I'm
it
still
can be. It's
there.
hard at first.
I've got
Yeah.
I got my toes in a few pies.
You're going to be a
Something.
manager in
No.
no time. You're at the turn
Well,
turn to manager.
yeah, I could so Captain Lou Albano, get myself a nice Hawaiian shirt and just get drunk. It'd be brilliant.
Just talk shit. That's all they did was just talk
Yeah.
shit. Like you said, yeah, get wasted, drunk, and talk shit.
I mean, I can do that. I'll do that for money if people are willing to pay. So put it out there, people. I'll take international bookings, American.
Yeah. Well, I want to leave you guys with a clip. I asked filmmaker Alex Michel, I was like, hey, can you cut a clip less than 5 minutes for kayfabe so we can show the people like a finished part of what we've been working on for the better part of a year? So here it is. Here is a clip from the movie.
This Wednesday night, September the 29th, the Seattle Center Arena, the setting for the World's Championship.
This is Vince McMahon, recently retired president of World Wrestling Entertainment.
The one and indeed the only Andre the Giant.
One of the rising superstars in the world of comedy. Welcome to Madison Square Garden, Andy. Hi, how are you?
The Machiavellian face of professional wrestling started out as a brash ringside announcer of the former WWF.
Superfly going for the big slam. Oh, he drove it. He drove it down to the camera. He's up to the second one.
Upon obtaining the Capital Wrestling Corporation from his father in 1984, he felt the promotion needed a rebrand, one that spoke to the totality of his vision.
In the wrestling business, it's a question of two or more individuals going out to the ring, wrestling, having a little bit of applause or what have you from the audience, and it's time to go home until the next match. That's not really what we do. We're in the sports entertainment business, and there is a huge philosophical difference between being in strictly the wrestling business and being in the sports entertainment business as we are.
He's taken a lot of punishment and is seemingly impervious to that punishment. Still finding, and again, just phenomenal strength.
If you control the territorial networks, like Rupert Murdoch controls the news media, then you can monopolize the sport. He decided on the name Worldwide Wrestling Federation. He quickly shortened it to the World Wrestling Federation, or WWF.
Hello, everyone. This is Vince McMahon in the studios of the USA Cable Network. We wholeheartedly welcome you to the premiere of All American Wrestling.
What is the nature of pro wrestling? Is it a great spectacle of power and will, or do you consider it to be a candy-coated entertainment aimed at mass audiences?
Fuji going to work on the left leg of Rocky Johnson is not quivering. Rocky in tremendous pain.
And a steam from Deppen. Oh, what a clothesline! There you go. It's fitting that your days here in the WWE are over. Because so is this marriage. I want a divorce.
The validity of these matches has been subject to much speculation over the years since they were first held. There is blood, there are injuries. So why does the term sport disturb purists of athletics? There you go. That is a clip of kayfabe. A little bitty snippet of the intro. So hopefully that gets you guys excited to see more. I'm excited to get this thing all done and out to the public and watch it with you guys all over the place. I definitely would love to go do it in the UK, maybe after a wrestling match or during a ride. That would be like a lot of fun to do that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Dara, thank you for hanging out with us.
With pleasure. Thank you very much, Jason.
We
I
got to
will,
bring you back on and talk wrestling again. I could do this
Sure.
all day, dude.
No problem, man. But it's been great. It's been a good laugh. A good laugh, mate. Yeah, we'll have to do it again sometime. I hope it wasn't too boring for you all. And yeah, I
No,
guess
I think
we'll.
no people love the show. Gene, thank you for hooking this whole show up. Thank you guys all for watching. Ben Burgess will be here tomorrow with his episode of Philosophy for the People. I won't be here till Tuesday. And we are